I have no doubt they will. I think there's an increasing recognition that data sharing is a critical component of conducting scientific research. Good scientific citizenship these days really requires, I think, data sharing. People recognize that in a siloed environment where you have only access to the data that you generated, say in your laboratory, or if a small or medium-sized company of limited resources only had the chance to take the data from the patients they've enrolled thus far, you really can't answer the questions as comprehensively. So there's a recognition, which I think this effort is all about, that pre-competitive data sharing is necessary and supports competitive efforts to develop drugs. It also supports non-competitive scientific advances. It's a win-win for everybody: patients, companies, the agency, the public health.
In the immediate term, we're starting to launch this today, but if we look at where we want the rare disease cures accelerator to be, say, in 5 years' time, one of the things we're trying to go after is three major kinds of activities that go on in drug development that we sort of see as three areas of challenge. And one is the characterization of disease. So what is the natural progression of a disease? How much variability is there? What markers could be used to measure potentially improvements in the disease, slowing the course of disease and so on. So characterizing diseases. And then identifying what matters the most to patients and trying to measure that in clinical trials. And actually designing trials so that patients are able and want to participate in them. They're not too burdensome. They can get to them. They can continue to carry on their jobs and having their children go to school. So what matters most to patients, and how can we measure those things in trials? And finally, how do you run trials where you've got only a few people or they're geographically dispersed? How can you run them, and what is the design of the trial? So three areas you might think about, and we think of these as components that we see building into this accelerator. The disease platform work, the analytic platform work that's going on now and that we're starting and launching today is going to actually inform all of that. Okay, it's going to help inform and do a better job with natural history studies and disease progression, understanding that better, helping us identify clinical outcome measures that are meaningful and measurable and can be used in trials, and hopefully the ones that matter most to patients. We want to develop standardized measures that are publicly available that can be used by different disease areas that where the impact is shared. For example, physical function. To the extent that physical function is affected by a rare disease and its progression, can we use the same kind of set of measures or adapt a set of measures so that people don't have to start from scratch? Because it's very labor intensive. And the third component that I hope we see beginning to mature and move along in a few years' time is putting together a clinical trial ready network of investigators and clinical sites where people can have good training and what you need to do to be a clinical investigator. There can be knowledge sharing. It's easier for patients around the world to get access to those trials and beyond protocol, and that we're really starting to have that platform and infrastructure built out to support rare disease drug development.
We're launching this today. This data and analytics platform is a foundational piece, as Dr. Mullin said. It's a critical component of what we're going to use to power the overall accelerator. All three components are going to rely on these aggregated data. It will inform everything. So I'm very excited about the fact that this is a transformative effort. We announced at the meeting today that we're open for business, right? I say we collectively, the community that's working on this. The result of that has been we've already been approached during this very meeting about people wanting to contribute data to it. So 5-year question, if we're having that kind of result in one day, I see in 5 years a whole different ability for me and my team to interact with sponsors in this space, to interact with scientific organizations in this space. Ideally, we'll be able to leverage the lessons that we've learned from the explorations of these data, bring them to bear on the trials that are under consideration for design, and then move those trials into operational status with the core outcome measures and with the trial network supporting them. So I think it's a real transformative era here. So one of the great things about the data part of the initiative is that these data are going to come in at Critical Path Institute and NORD have tremendous experience in this space. The technical infrastructure already exists. We've been dealing with data sharing, aggregated databases in individual diseases for quite some time. What this effort is about is bringing to bear a fundamental framework that's going to apply to all rare diseases to streamline and make more efficient the process. So investigators, scientists, clinicians who are accustomed to doing research and working with standard data sets that allow querying for these for the questions that they might want to pursue. They're going to have all that available to them in a very familiar way. There will be a portal, there's access, you become a qualified investigator, and then you have access to the data. And that's what patients want. Patients want their data to advance the research in their condition. So this is really going to be, again, a win-win for everybody.
I think that connecting the strength that NORD has in outreach to the community and their connection to people with different disease areas will be brought into and be connected and harnessed in a really kind of high power way with the analytics and data science strengths that c-path brings to this process, so that we'll be able to create these really high quality natural history studies that also include and identify things that matter most to patients. We're able to develop these clinical outcome sets that matter to them more quickly and with less duplication of effort and less frustration for patients. I think one of the things that we sometimes see today at FDA is when you've got this situation of individual researchers, individual clinician or startup companies and patient groups, that fragmentation can also lead to, and with limited knowledge, okay, with this information being collected, none of those parties necessarily having expertise in developing regulatory grade evidence, that sometimes all those efforts produce a set of evidence that's not quite where we need it to be to really serve the patients the best. So I think we're really putting them in the front to say, let's not waste any of their time. Let's not waste their time living with the disease or working as they do to try to help researchers. Let's make every bit of it count to produce the highest quality evidence and the smartest study designs and development programs possible. So that it is, I think, really putting them at the forefront there of the effort.
It really does. The centralized nature of the initiative is really critical, I think, in having those patients in the driver's seat. They want their data to be used, and they want the data to be used widely to inform any aspect of research. And so when we have more siloed or individual efforts going on where a patient may have consented for their data to be used in a proprietary database, that gets closed off from the scientific community. I don't think that's what anybody wants. What we have here is a centralized, kind of pro-access model that's going to allow any number of researchers to use their data, and I think that's highly consistent with what the patients are after.